the place to do it. You know, my favorite sitting in the garbage chair. He says, with Joe.
Hey, thanks for you all being here. My name's David McReynolds, and I appreciate you being here. And this is Yogi's 60th birthday, as you all know, and so and a tribute to Jim Fregosi. So Yogi's going to take it away and talk to you a little bit. But thanks again for being here.
First of all, there's one person who made this event possible, and that's David McReynolds. A scouts party, and then I just happened to turn 60, so we made it a scouts party and
a birthday party.
But then when Jimmy passed away, I called David the day that Jimmy passed away, and I said, can we please make it a celebration of life, and we want to do the same thing that they're going to do in Clearwater. They had the stadium. David said, it's your birthday party, do you want to do it? And I said, yes, I do. Because those of you who don't know me probably don't know Jim Fregosi when he played shortstop for the California Angels. I was very lucky. I was a high school coach in Southern California, and I got to meet Jimmy Fregosi as a manager of the California Angels. And I listened to him talk to kids that were 6, 7, 8 years old, and he would stay around until 4:30 in the afternoon. And then he'd go to the ballpark and manage a major league team. Then I got into scouting, and the first time I walked into a lunchroom with Jim Fregosi, he said, who's this young guy? And I said, my name's Bill Yogi Young. I'd like to introduce myself. He said, sit down, shut up, and listen. I sat down, I shut up, and I listened. I learned more from that man in the last 20 years about scouting, because we call him Mr. Knowledge. He is Mr. Knowledge. He knew the game from the inside and from the outside. He knew it as a player, he knew it as a manager, he knew it as a front office guy. The one guy that I am so thankful that he's here tonight is his son, Jimmy Jr., because the first time I ever tried to get a job, he blocked me. And when I called him and told him I was going to do this, he said, thank you. And I'm saying it to the Fregosi family, I'm saying it to all of you here. The guys who are going to speak, we're all going to tell you one thing and one thing only. Thank you, Pete, for being here, not only for me, but for Jimmy and for Dave McReynolds, because if you don't know Dave McReynolds, you might want to get to know him. Because he has these things quite frequently at his house. I'm done.
Thanks to all the citizens. Thanks to Dave. It's outstanding. Thanks to Dave. That's outstanding. Yogi, happy birthday. Thank you for sharing. Jimmy, thank you for asking me to speak and talk about your father. I went to Jim Fregosi Sr., and I started out as Babe Ruth League teammates. I was 14, he was 13. And we went through high school together, and it was, this is tough. He was our friend, he was our classmate, he was most of all our teammate, and in a very special way, he was our hero. To be a part of an athletic career that this man had was just unbelievable. Every once in a while now you're reading a story in a paper. There was one I think this week, might have been USA Today, I'm not sure, Bob, but they talked about two sport athletes, BFD. Jim Fregosi was a four-sport athlete. He ran track, not around baseball season. He ran track during baseball season. He ran track meets and baseball games at the same time, really. He was a leading broad jumper, and it was a broad jump back then, in Northern California. He would take his shirt off and start walking across the diamond. Then he'd start jogging over to the football field, around the track, and almost not break stride. By that time, he was down to his sliding pants, run the length of the broad jump it, win, start putting his stuff back on so he didn't miss a half inning. Play this true story. He had the school record for 10 years. The school record was broken. His record was broken by Lynn Swan. He's to this day, think of this now, to this day, this was 1959, he set the CAL meet record for the broad jump, and it still stands 55 years later. 23 feet 8 inches. This was a baseball player, and a football player, and a basketball player, and a brilliant person, highest academic part of our school, a very good school, we're proud to say, Sarah High School in San Mateo. Two of our classmates, teammates, Bob Garrett, I'd like you to stand up, Tony Verdoya, that are here. Sarah High, class of 59. I could go on about all the things he did. He was unbelievable, an unbelievable athlete, and to be able to see the things that this guy could do. He could fly, track. If we needed to win the relay, to win the track meet, and we had to be home for the baseball game, they'd stall the track meet until the baseball game was over, so Jim would come over and anchor the relay team. True story. True story. Jimmy, I can't imagine what it was like being Jim Fregosi Jr. And I just want you to know that you've got about 40 more brothers now, the class of 1959. A couple of more, so we'll always be there for you. Jim was a lot of things. Loud, at times unbearable. This is a testimony, right? Always opinionated. Generous to a fault. The most gifted person. I mean, good looks, great student, unbelievable athlete, and go on. He could give us a lot more names than that, too. Very confident, most confident person I've ever met in my life, and there was a reason. He was good at it. He was, more than anything, he was loyal. He was loyal to his friends. He was loyal to his family. He was the most proud of his grandkids. We talked about that earlier today. Another thing we talked about, nobody's been more prepared to leave this earth than Jim was. And he took care of everything before he left. And he left us with a great example of how to do things. He became unbelievably fixated on things. He joined the Neptune Society, and he couldn't wait to show everybody the car. See, I know where, you bastards don't know where you're going. I know where I'm going. So he was very proud of that. So, anyhow, we were blessed to have him as long as we did. I got a lot of chances, a lot of the writers during the last couple of weeks to come and ask me about him for stuff, and I never used this term before, but I used it. I used it for him. He was larger than life. Elvis has left the building, but the memories will always be here, and they're wonderful memories. Thank you.
I forgot one thing. We did all kinds of picture images of Jimmy when he was the manager of the Chicago White Sox, and they wore those god-awful red, white, and blue uniforms. And they said that when he started with the Chicago White Sox, he wore number 6, but it was retired. So Reinsdorf told him, you can't wear Charlie Lau's number. So he said, well, I want number 11 that what I wore with the Angels. And they said, no, you can't wear number 11 because that was Louis Aparicio and it's retired. So Jimmy, the only number that we have on a uniform with your dad is 18. Please. I haven't known him as long as Gary. I met him the day he became manager of the Angels on June 4th of '78. And I will say as confidence, Gary forgot to tell you that Jimmy played shortstop and Timmy Cohen played third base and Gary played left field. And Jimmy used to tell him, lean against the fence and stay out of my way because you're going to screw up.
There's some truth to that.
And he used to always tell me that he could never figure out the second best athlete to come out of Sarah High School, whether it was Bonds or Swan, but he knew he was the best. He had a confidence about him. In '79, we won the American League West and played Baltimore. We lost the Orioles in 4 games. Pat Royce was a columnist in Minneapolis, and back then we didn't have the internet and stuff. And Royce wrote a column saying that little Jimmy Fregosi's godfather, Gene Autry, bought him a team. He didn't know how to manage it, and all he did during the game was pick his nose and sit in the dugout. Pat was a good friend, but Jimmy was a better friend, and I worked at the same paper with the same chain as Pat. I saw Pat's column. I gave it to Jim. Jim said, you know, we're going to play the home opener in Minnesota next year. Could you see if Pat will go have dinner with us that night? So I called Patrick and said, hey, Fregosi read your column. He wants to have dinner with you after the home opener. He goes, no, he doesn't. I go, yeah, he really does. He really wants to. So we had the dinner at a place the old timers might remember in Minneapolis called Charlie's Cafe Exceptional. Patrick walks in late. It's all the media from the Angels and their travel coaching staff. There's one seat left at the table. It's next to Fregosi. He saved it for Patrick. Patrick walked in and he said, oh, Mr. Royce, I have a seat for you here. Come on over. What are you drinking? Let me make sure I get you a drink. We've ordered you a shrimp cocktail. I'm not sure what you want for dinner. Go ahead and order it. We go through the salad. The entree comes, and Royce finally says, Jim, can I ask you one thing? He goes, what? Would you just yell at me and get it over with? So he knew how to handle situations pretty well. You know, I think the best thing that I've ever heard about him actually came from someone that's here right now. It's Marv Thompson. That the one thing about Jimmy was everybody thought they were his best friend. He knew how to way to walk into a room, and when you left the room that Jimmy was in, you thought you just left your best friend you ever had. And that was really true. And I think the other thing about him was, I remember watching him play with the Angels in the 60s. He was the best shortstop in baseball in the 60s. I don't care who else played. He was the best because he could play defense and he could hit. He had the tumor on his ankle when he went to the Mets. He never fully recovered from that. Nobody played shortstop like Jimmy could. And I think people forget that. He came and he went. One day he's playing for the Pirates. Well, he's sitting on the bench for the Pirates. And the next day he flies in from Houston. He takes over and manages the Angels. Gets fired there, and he decides he doesn't know enough about pitching, so he gets a job managing in the minor leagues because he wants to learn pitching, and he knows as a minor league manager he's going to have to learn pitching. Comes back, manages the minor league, or manages the big leagues with the White Sox, with Philadelphia, with Toronto, and then he becomes a scout.
And I think what he did was, for a lot of you guys, we never big league scouts. He thought scouts were more important than he was as a player or he was as a manager. And he always treated scouts with the utmost respect. It's like, to me, he brought an extra side of dignity to being a scout. That it wasn't a lesser job, it was the most important job in the game. And, you know, if we talk about his lifestyle, Jimmy Jr. told me once, he goes, "Yeah, I used to hate you." And I said, "Why?" He goes, "Well, I think you were in junior high school when your dad got the job." And I lived in I worked for a suburban paper, so he had never seen it. And he goes, "My dad would come home at some weird hours, and he'd always be talking about what he and Tracy did the night before." And I think, how rude to talk about your girlfriend in front of my mom. One day I'm at the ballpark and he's screaming at Tracy, and I think, "She's here?" And he goes, "You walked in," and I thought, "Oh, it's just a fat, ugly guy. It's not me." But that goes with, John Sherholtz has a plaque on his wall in Orlando. He sent me this thing the other day. We were talking about Jimmy. And Jimmy gave it to him, and it says, "Life's journey is not to arrive at the grave safely in a well-preserved body, but rather to skid in sideways, totally worn out, shouting, 'What a ride I had!'" And I think Jimmy Sr. had quite a ride.
Yeah.
Now since we have the big group here, we're going to sing happy birthday to Yogi, and then we'll get back to drinking the rest of this wine. Where's Yogi at?
Okay, make it the short version.
Happy birthday, Yogi!
Mr. Rosen from Denver here would like to know where we got the name Yogi.
Well, I can't tell the story.
Boo Boo gave it
I
to
am
him.
not Yogi. I am Yogi the Bear, because when I was in the minor leagues, I could find a restaurant that was open at 2 or 3 o'clock. I worked for the Yankees, and I had to deal with Yogi Berra in a meeting one time, and he said, "Son, we need to know." So I'm Yogi the Bear from Yellowstone, and there's still more steaks, and I'm going to take some home with me. So that's how I got the nickname Yogi. And my roommate was killed in a car crash after our rookie season, and when I got back into baseball, I said, "You know what, I'm going to," and John Bowles isn't here, but John Bowles was his coach. And I told John Bowles the first day that I got into scouting, I said, I changed my name back to Bill Yogi Young because of Richie Farrell. And if you ever go to his stadium, Rich Farrell was a catcher, and I honored him by taking Yogi as my nickname. So it's a nickname. I'm not Yogi the Bear. I am Yogi the Bear. I'm not Yogi Berra, and I'm not Gary Hughes neither. Did you see him double? We both were Tommy Bahamas. And I'm shaving tomorrow. So you don't get confused. But again, this is the man that we need to give one more applaud to, because
Yeah, baby.
next year all the scouts can come back. Wives, you're not allowed.
All right, let's take a Yogi.